can even read, and I'm bringing this up again because I think it's the most popular teaching there is in the church world of Christianity, even those who have supposedly come out of there. Some call it two gospels, and some say saved by faith, by grace alone, um, and Jews are saved by works. But the deceptive thing about saved by faith alone is that what they're really saying is there is no need for any kind of growth or actually becoming righteous, holy, spotless, blameless. That the goal, that's the end goal constantly. Somebody that believes and abides in the vine and is saved by grace, their sins are washed, they're not condemned for being ignorant and screwing up. They're in this grace, the process of growing, being chastised, learning, because there's a lot to learn, and he shows you along the way what to do. That's what grace is. It's not, I fell out of my chair, landed in a church temple building, and I'm saved. Past tense, it's over. So they mix truth with lies, because you are saved from sins apart from works of the law. But somebody that claims faith and they produce bad fruits, it's a bad tree. Make no mistake. We're not talking about the people under grace that are maybe ignorant in something, need some correction that's going to come. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people willfully staying away from seeking this truth and continuing in sin, which is transgression of the law and commandments. Once this all comes together, it's the confusion starts going away that the people claim there actually is, and it's really nice to see that the scriptures actually are not contradicting each other, and I never believed that it did. But even my understanding is greater now on that than it was before. Peter and Paul got together in Acts, and they said that it's by faith for both the circumcised and uncircumcised, for both Gentile and Jew. Both of them were in this agreement. They understood this. They were preaching the same gospel. Blind, ignorant people that say that they were teaching a different gospel, they're blind. It's okay though, it's okay to be it's okay to be ignorant if you're seeking truth, but it's not okay to be ignorant and never look into what somebody's telling you. At least look into it. That's the least somebody could do. It's what a wise person does. Proverbs. They at least test it and look into it and then see if these things be true. And that's how I'm understanding and seeing everything. It's so clear, especially in Acts. Acts is really good to show you that Peter, Paul, and the others they met each other face to face, and they were in agreement. They taught the gospel to the Gentiles and the gospel to the Jews, circumcised. And you could say Jews or circumcised or Gentiles and uncircumcised. It's the same thing, They taught the gospel to the circumcision. That's where he focused. And Paul's focus, his main focus, was going to be, after a little time in Jerusalem, to the Gentiles, because he was the main one, along with like Barnabas and probably a few others, to do that and spread it out to them and break down the barrier between Jew and Gentile that existed for so long. The enmity, and even Peter, after 3 years solid or more, a little bit more maybe, with the Messiah, had to be corrected by Paul right to his face. He called him a hypocrite. Imagine this. But did Peter get angry and shrink back, or did he take heed to what Paul said, and then they were in agreement because they trusted in the Father for whatever Paul was saying. They both trusted, and they received the same thing, didn't they? They received the same thing, and he received correction from Paul because he played the hypocrite on starting to act like he was together with this group, and then when the others started coming, he was like afraid and wanted to go away or something. So there was some a little bit of confusion on Peter's part came on him, or a little bit of worry because of the strong roots in Hebrew and the law and everything else. They were so rooted in that. You could see why this happened. You could see it, where he was tempted to sort of, I don't have the words perfectly in Acts, but he got tempted and kind of caved into a little bit of hypocrisy with the Gentiles and Jews, or the Hebrews there. So once you see that there's no contradictions, that they taught the same gospel, this teaching goes away. That there really was two different ways to be saved. It's not true. It's not true. The same commandments for them, the same faith, the same receiving the same Spirit for them and the Gentiles also. And Paul maintained, along with Peter and the rest, they all maintain this, that it's through faith, first and foremost, apart from any works of the law, that someone is counted for being cleansed from their sins, and washed, that repentance. But then you abide in the vine, and you just continue to believe that he's going to work in you. And you believe that God will do it. He will finish what he started, like we read. He started it, and he's good for finishing it to the end. And that's the faith that you're supposed to have. That faith specifically. It's not a faith of, where the faith alone thing is wrong, is that it's a faith of sort of just believe that like Messiah exists and what he did is true, which is not all by itself completely wrong. This is why it's deceiving. It's wrong in that they don't understand what the purpose of faith is for. It's to actually become like him, have the same mind, which is to do the Father's will. And that's made out very clear in all the gospel accounts. Someone should understand that first pretty good before they start trying to understand some of what Paul is saying. That's kind of where I've been led, like the church world sort of focuses on Paul as for the church. That saying is wrong all by itself. It's wrong because that same faith was given to the Jews also, the same Spirit. You'd be not just hard pressed, it's impossible to find that they received a different Spirit or a different gospel. I just don't know how they do it. There's some things that are so obvious to me that I don't know how they do it. Like, he preached the gospel of the kingdom of heaven, and they're talking about a gospel of the kingdom of earth. They're saying that exists, and separating it from another, like a better gospel of the kingdom of heaven, celestial and terrestrial, up and down. So all those words are for the gospel of the kingdom of heaven that Messiah spoke of, which is for everyone. It's not just some kind of partial racist thing going on here. It's for anyone who reads. And I'm seeing it clearer too. Paul, it becomes easier to understand over time. There's going to be certain verses that are harder to understand, and then they become easier to understand once you see what's actually going on with what the Jews were trying to do. They were implying that it's, okay, faith, sure, whatever, but they also said you must keep all the law perfectly and fulfill it. You do that, like with faith and with circumcision, physical circumcision and whatever else they want to add, then you're saved. That's a lie. But this is different than just faith alone, though. See, because faith alone doesn't have anywhere to really grow. It's just kind of a recommendation to do good to, I don't know, do good to humanity. Not everything they say is wrong. But the people that don't focus on this never truly grow and come to a knowledge of truth. And that's why we read that, because there's many that don't come to a knowledge of truth. They're ever learning and they're always confused, but they don't think they're confused. And that's the confusing thing, is that they're confused and don't think they're confused. That's when it becomes spiritually, dangerous, is when you sort of think, I figured it all out and I have perfect understanding. You're never supposed to do that. You always lean on his understanding. That's it. And then he removes blinders. This is what it means to be under grace. It's not a heavy burden to do his will. It's a pace, my understanding, that he gives you that you can keep up with. And that it's good to do his will. That's the whole point, to keep his commandments. It's not burdensome. It's not heavy, because it's by faith and grace. And because that grace is so sufficient, and it acknowledges and already accounts for our stupidity, it allows for growing. But you have to be growing. That's just the main point, the main message. You got to be growing. The kingdom of heaven has to grow within. As long as that's happening, someone might be at a different level spiritually, but you can't trash the other person. You can just maybe offer some advice that could make them correct something that may have took 2 more years, and you could have helped them like that. But you don't put it on someone and start commanding them what to do. That's why Paul never did. He stayed away from what I can see, from making real hardcore commands like the Jews did. Follow the law, keep the law, follow it, And Paul's acknowledging over and over again that the law is righteous and good, but he knows how it works. And the person that believes also will come to know how it works. That it's your personal growth with your Creator. Along that path, you're going to learn on your whatever pace God has given you. It's that simple. That's why they didn't command the Gentiles to do too much in Acts or whatever. Was that the Council of Jerusalem or somewhere in Acts, I think? They just said to restrain from some of the nasty things. Start with that and that'll be good. That'll get you pretty, you'll take a lot of sin, a lot of blinding out if you just keep these 3 things right away, but then God will show you what to do from here on out. And that's how you understand the words when he says, I have a lot to tell you still, but you cannot bear them. See, because because the grace is sufficient and good. He's not going to be a liar and put it all on his disciples right when they received the Spirit. And he told them, I have a lot to tell you, but you can't bear it all now. So this is true for every individual in their life. If God showed you everything you have to do at once, like the end, where your end is, and he gives you that in the beginning, everyone probably would cross their eyes and die, no one would want to do it, because it would be like such a heavy burden and command to be like perfect and spotless. So that's not how it works. Anyone who says otherwise, I think, is a liar, and anyone who says there's no growth, that there shouldn't be a growth, is also a liar. The truth is kind of in the middle of these 2 extremes that I'm seeing. Pharisees of the old that hardcore command you to keep the laws, not because they cared about God, but because they boasted in the flesh. It was all about themselves. Look how good we are, and we got these people to do that, and they just wanted disciples for themselves and to rule over them. And then there's the other extreme, which is sort of a grace is a license to sin. Some will outright say it, but I think most won't outright say it, but they favor towards that side, is that it's sort of just, yeah, I believe in bread alone, that's it. We don't follow the command of Messiah to live by every word of God that proceeds out of his mouth, that man shall not live by bread alone, that man shall not live by that type of manna from heaven alone, but it's got to be by every other word, it's got to be complete. And so that's why it's a narrow path and difficult for most people to find, is because it's offensive and it's against nature and human nature, and our own will doesn't want to do these things. But if you want to do these things, that's more than a sure sign that, that's like, it doesn't come from man. So if you want to do these things, that's a good thing. It doesn't make you to want to do what's right, it does not make you a legalist or someone that believes you're saved by doing those things. And that's very hard it seems that's very hard to explain to people. They will condemn you right away as a Pharisee and a legalist. And hopefully you've noticed, even if I've said some things that weren't right throughout all my videos, that I've never commanded people how to live or force it on them, just exposing some false doctrines and stuff. But hopefully I don't think, I think we've done pretty well concerning that I never told anyone, you got to do this and you got to overcome it in 5 days, never. And I'm never going to do that, because then I would be a hypocrite, because I myself didn't do it. Because no one's truly done that, So if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. That's a true saying. You have that life when you believe, apart from all works. But if you keep his commandments, if that's what you're striving to do, to abide in the vine, that life will remain. He who believes in him will never die. What's it mean to believe? Well, to abide in him. If you love me, keep my commands. So that's a promise. You're not going to be in a spiritual destruction of despair constantly if you're striving to do what's right and you have it with a proper understanding that you're not saved by doing these things, like, so no one can boast, but that he's leading you and working in you to actually do these things. I don't know why that's so hard for people to believe and understand. It's not a contradiction. It's you acknowledging that you can't do them, and then God works in you to do them. That's it. You deny yourself like he denied himself. And obviously we're not the Messiah, so we ourselves aren't that perfect example, but that's why we have that perfect example, because that is the perfect example. I can see that clearly. So what's so confusing and damaging about two gospels, and sort of what the church world teaches, is that his life is not the example you're supposed to live, which I find mind-numbing now, and maybe I didn't a year ago or even a few months ago. I find that the life he lived that it's not the perfect example. Mind-numbing. What was it then? So they follow another, they follow another Messiah is what's going on. And I haven't said like Jesus a lot, because to me, if I have a knowledge of something, then why would I willfully say something that's less correct than like Yeshua if I already know that's the name of Joshua, because he had the same name? So that's just out of respect, because I just want to do it, and that's to keep his commandments is just out of respect because I want to do it, because that's what he did for us. you should now, if you have that spirit, want to do these things. And if you want to do them, well, then it's not a burden. It's not a heavy burden. So I don't know that I can say it's, some out there say it's like you should use his name, the Hebrew name, and some say it's not wrong, and some say it's pretty bad. It's wrong, and some say it even means like Hail Zeus or something, and I'm not really sure that's true. I'm not sure either way on that, but what I do think is true, that the people who continue to use that name all the time, I think most of them believe in another Messiah. And the ones that don't, it doesn't necessarily mean they're on this path, but you know what I'm saying? I think it filters out a lot of people, but not necessarily everyone. I can't make that statement. Just because someone's using that name, I don't think it means they're automatically false and that they're not growing or on this path. But I think for most people that continue to want to use that name and they just don't know better, they sort of believe in that loose grace is like a license to sin. It's like a different Messiah, not leading them to the truth, and one that came from somewhere other than what we're told by God's word, where Christ, where Messiah came from, which is Son of Man, Son of humanity, from humanity, and he's the first fruit, the firstborn of all creation, and he's the beginning of creation of God, meaning he's not literally first to be, he's not Adam, literally the beginning, but he's the beginning of, when it says the beginning of creation, he's the beginning of the new creation, the new image that Adam failed to truly become, and then everyone through Adam died, and in Adam all die, so they failed to, and obviously this was purposed by the Father. He didn't try to make it all right and that Adam would live forever, and eat the fruit and live forever. He didn't try that, and then it failed, and then he made a mistake. That's blasphemy. You can't say that. You can't have that understanding that the Father failed, that he genuinely tried and it didn't go according to the way he knows it's going to go and purposed it to go. That humanity must fall and be tested and learn through evil and be humbled by it. It just seemed good and necessary to him because he knew the outcome of it that we can't maybe picture still, at least not fully. So he seemed it to be good and necessary that with the snake there, with the knowledge of good and evil, after all that, he said all these things were very good. And when he says something's very good, that's like better than me saying something is very good. Like, oh, this food was very good. Well, this is the Creator saying it's very good. And they won't bring this up in the church world, that he said it's very good with the serpent in there. He didn't create it after day 7. That's not my understanding. That's not what he rested. He didn't create anything new after that. Everything already started working, and his earth and everything was working, and the laws of the earth that he sustains. And I don't know how he does it, but he does. They exist. That everything is under law, including the heavens and earth. It's not a chaos of lawlessness, because I think in the beginning, possibly a day that's not counted, and I think it has something to do with day 8 after day 7, like the new creation, circumcised on the 8th day. In the beginning he created the heavens and earth. Therefore that could have been, even though it doesn't say, I'm just speculating, it could have been an actual day, and then on day 1 he declared 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 would be actually, there's a spot for 8, and I think it's accounting for what's coming, the new creation. And then you have circumcised on the 8th day. You have 8 people saved from the flood. And I don't know of, there could be more examples of this somewhere else with this 8. But I think it's a symbol, a type for a new creation. The full thing, not what we have, even though this is the beginning of that, but there's still a full thing to come. Another day, if you will, after 7. So they don't believe in the sovereignty of the Father, that this is how you can have confidence in him, that he is sovereign, that this is how he works out. He works out all these things for your good, for his good, but also for your good, for those who love him, and those who love him will keep his way, his commandments. They're called the royal priesthood and holy nation, of which Israel never could truly attain. Like it says in Deuteronomy or somewhere else in there, it says, if you do these things, you'll be the head of nations, a royal priesthood. And it was almost like he didn't try, but it looked like it was going that way. And maybe that someday all nations would come to Jerusalem, and through them, they would have the special honor of saving the nations and teaching them the true way. But then it just never happened. It looks like it was a failure, and I think he likes to do that, to make it look like he can't do something, but then he's going to come out triumphantly, and that's actually contrary to the truth, that he actually failed it on purpose, for a purpose, that the tribes were lost and scattered, and there's going to be some kind of awakening at the end, and ultimately this new kingdom of heaven will do what that Jerusalem, that kingdom on earth, natural, couldn't do. Why? Because he would write it in their hearts. So that tells me that they didn't truly have it in their hearts. I'm still trying to understand that a little bit fuller, because if that was a prophecy to come for the new covenant, when he says, I will make a new covenant with Jacob, and obviously we understand we're connected to Jacob through Abraham spiritually, new Israel, that I will write my law in their hearts, and they will be my God, and they will be my, oh, I said that wrong. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. That's something I can't believe, they couldn't have had that, is what I'm trying to say. Not truly what we have today. So I think that's why it's a better covenant, but I still don't maybe have the full picture. Because the saints that did believe, they wanted to keep these things, and they were counted for righteous for believing. It was never through them keeping the law, because no one could actually keep it. So that therefore, if no one could keep it perfectly from birth to their death, they were transgressors and sinners. So the law never made anyone righteous or counted someone for righteousness, even back then. So it appears like it's something new, but I don't believe it's actually new. I think what's new is that the power that we have now through the Messiah, this new, better mediator spirit written in our hearts, is better than what it was before. And maybe someone understands it better than I do, but because you can't ignore that the saints back then did what he required at the time, and he just didn't require it of the true saints, I don't think, to truly love their enemies from the heart, because the Gentiles automatically were enemies, but I think they were enemies in a natural sense, like they kind of hated them, but I don't know if the saints truly, I have a problem believing that they were perfect in the heart, is what I'm saying, concerning loving your enemy. Because King David, the way that they quote from him, even in the New Testament, it sounds like he was a believer. He'll be in the kingdom. He won't be going into judgment. And he killed a lot of people. So, and he's even called a bloody man. But this wasn't required back then. It wasn't a command. Is there a command that says, that he commanded them to love their enemies back then? I thought I used to know that. I thought it was a no. But I'm sure the scriptures pointed to that. I'm sure there's verses that talk about doing good to your enemy. I know that for sure. But I think they were types. They couldn't truly fulfill it until Messiah came, because he received the Spirit of God with power, and he had the knowledge and understanding, and it was written in his heart to be able to love his enemy. He wasn't a fraud like all the Pharisees were at the time. It was really corrupt. By the time Christ was born, Yeshua was born, it was really corrupt in that they were self-righteous. So this is why it's hard to teach this without trying to make myself look self-righteous, because I don't believe, not even one iota, that I'm saved by how good I keep the law, but I want to do what's right. So I've been confused even before I came to a better understanding of this as a Pharisee, a legalist, but I already know that I'm no good and that I can't do anything. But I want to learn, I want to grow, and I don't, you can't say that that's evil or wrong. That's exactly what the saints did. You could read about it, and if that's what they did, then you can absolutely do the same thing without being self-righteous. It is possible to do that, but not too many in history have done that. They did it for the purpose to be self-righteous. So that's where it gets deceiving, is that someone can start keeping these things. They kept the Sabbath, and they kept, I think most of them, they didn't physically go around murdering people all the time, and even stealing. And so what the law did is it kind of it gave them opportunity to look righteous and look at all the things I'm keeping, but they did it without the Spirit of God truly working in them. And actually, the reality is they didn't even keep it because they were accused of not keeping it. We read that more than once. Yeshua tells them, don't you tell people to keep the law and you don't keep the law? They added like tons of things to the Sabbath. They made it absolutely crazy. And from what I understand, and a little bit of the Talmud, and they added like hundreds of things. Like, I'm one of those people today would probably say, like, you can't flip a light switch. It got so crazy to the equivalent of that, whatever they did back then. And you have some examples. I wish there were more, but I don't think we need more, because to say I think we need more is to say that God failed in what we have. So we don't actually need more. But washing of hands and cups and stuff like this, all these things they added to the true pure way, and he brought them back to the pure way of keeping his word, living by every word. And they tried to, their whole goal was to accuse him. So if you want to do what's right, make no mistake, the more you do it, the more that he's giving you the grace to do it, and you're doing it from the heart, not because you think you're prideful and self-righteous, the more people will start accusing you and trying to trap you, just like they did them. That's why this is so powerful, because it's living. It never changes. They're going to start doing that to you, here and there. It'll happen. God's going to give you that experience so you can see how true he is, that people don't change. You're going to understand, and you're going to be able to tell them whatever you need to tell them to put them in their place properly, or say nothing when it's better to say nothing, because what does it say in Proverbs? A fool says, what is that verse? A fool says, speaks back, and then it says this exact opposite right after, and then somebody doesn't speak back. I have it butchered right now, but there's a back-to-back verse that It's easy to understand, but at like first glance, it's like, oh, contradiction, but it's not. Because under certain circumstances, it's better to say something wise and correct them. And some circumstances, it truly is better to say nothing at all. Just keep quiet, like he kept quiet sometimes. Because if you answer, then you're going to be caught in some kind of weird trap that they're playing, mind games. So both are true. It just depends on the situation. I wish I knew the verse, but I don't right now. So people kind of, I see the scriptures, the Old Testament scriptures, as they're like the real, this is who the Father is, obviously through the Spirit. We have to understand some of these things. There's some rightly discerning, because the Christianity world, they see the Old Testament as, they love to use verses to prove God is evil. It has nothing to do with that. And I'm convinced it's written in such a way that it convinces the whole world that he is that. But then people that could see the truth, they can see the true Father through the Spirit of the Word and through his Spirit on who he actually is this whole entire time. He's kind of hiding from people, in the dark, so to speak. And I think atheists have even said, why does he hide? Why doesn't he just reveal himself? If there is a God, why is he like hiding? Richard Dawkins, I think, said that. That was an interesting video. He basically admitted that there's a creator, but he just couldn't admit that it's, like an actual personal God or anything like that. But he did say an alien. His official statement was aliens created. High intelligence must have created us, and then the same natural ways he got trapped in a stupid trap, So he doesn't fully deny, actually. Because it's foolish, because the scriptures are true. You end up being a fool. Whoever denies that God exists is a fool, ultimately. So I think the more you do his will, the more you're actually blessed, the more peace you have, the more joy you have, the more, after a tough chastising or correcting, or seeing that you were blind and now you could see something better, and all those things hurt, the pride, and it kills it. Afterwards, it produces peace, the fruit of the Spirit. Paul talks about that. At the time, it seems not so good. And then this is the whole entire, that happens, you grow. Then God puts you through something else, and then you grow some more. And this just keeps on going. And then people are going to hate you for wanting to do what's right. And then you're supposed to count it as like, rejoice for being called evil, for doing good. So it's pretty special, the plan that God has for his people, because we start to see things that the rest don't see on who he is, how powerful he is, how weak we are, and acknowledge all these things and see the blinding that he talks about so much in scriptures, that even Israel would be blinded and all these things would happen to them. We get a physical picture more so of the destruction. That's sort of a spiritual destruction today, more so. The spiritual body is destroyed. So then what you have left, if the spiritual body is destroyed, is you're just carnal. You don't have his Spirit in you. It's dormant, it's dead, it's asleep, it's destroyed. And the only thing you can have left is naturally being blinded by this world. So I wrote some of these people I know, and wrote them even more, and no response. I don't think they like it. I'm just trying to lead them into truth. And that's all I can do. Because if I if I do nothing when Spirit says do something, and then they think I'm somebody that I'm not, then I'm becoming sort of one with them, and I'm not testifying as the truth, as light in the dark world. So we read of like watchmen in scriptures. If the watchman says nothing, the blood's on his head, the guilt is on him or something. Some of these things apply to us in certain situations. If we aren't like watchmen and do absolutely nothing, and we have people believing we're something we're not, well, spiritually, that's going to be on our head, because we're not true prophets then, or servants, or whatever. We're letting people believe that we're sinners, and we don't call ourselves sinners. We call ourselves saints under grace, being perfected. That's my understanding. If I call myself a sinner, then I'm basically calling my Father a sinner in the work he's doing in me. And when I make a mistake, that's my sin, and that's true. But I can't call myself overall a sinner, because that's not what I'm trying to do, is be a sinner and acknowledging I'm still a sinner. And there's more than one understanding to that. I think people could understand what I'm saying. We're sinners in that we'll still make mistakes, but you know what I mean. Abraham made mistakes, but he wasn't a sinner. See, he was under that faith. He made mistakes. Moses made mistakes, but he was a saint. And those are the examples, natural examples of something what it's like today. It's more spiritual today, more so, but in a way, it's still, a lot of things are the same, in that his law didn't change, because God doesn't change. And what humans are supposed to do to other humans didn't change. It didn't suddenly just disappear. Now you can, you're free to do whatever you want. You're free to hate. You're free to steal, lie, cheat, and all these other things. And that's not so. It's not so. It's not just like a recommendation. You're supposed to strive for the high calling. I think I read that somewhere. It's not a low calling. It's if anything, it's a higher calling than what they had before, because I think we're being perfected to a level that they could never achieve, because it just wasn't so back then. It wasn't required either. I don't believe. Otherwise, there would be no saints. If they were required to become the same heart, mind of the Messiah that we have now, exactly like this, then there would be no saints. Then all of them they would have worked in vain, I guess, with their faith, their God-given faith. Because I don't recall Abraham calling out God. I recall reading that God called out Abraham. And this is how it works for every person. He called him out. And so it's been like that ever since. It's just that we have a renewed, better covenant, and we understand what this grace is. I think that's the big difference. So with that, I forgot what this video is called. It happens a lot, it seems like. But it starts to become apparent who the people that don't really care about truth are when they start calling you legalist, and you're not. You're not. Then those people are obviously false. There's something going on there. There's some kind of deception. And they're leading people into that same deception, because whoever's one with somebody, the blind leader of the blind that's teaching them, is also, they're becoming that same, one blinding, and they accept that false prophet's truth. And what I say, I think I could back up every page of every word if I had to. Doesn't mean I understand it all perfectly, but I think I can back every word up, and they can't back up every word. They have to hide or not bring some things up on purpose. The frauds out there, I could read to them over and over that the saints love his commandments, his law. Over and over again, they say this. They're like speaking from within. They want to do these things. They love it. So now today, I guess we don't. We all hate it, right? Something's wrong with that. It never changed. Nothing changes as far as that goes, as far as who God is, and his word never changed. He's way too smart, wise, all-knowing for us to play secret, stupid little games like that, like where we pick and choose what pages we like to say is true and what's not. All of it's true. It just, you got to rightly divide when it's needed. That's all. All of it's true. All of it's applicable. All of it counts for truth. It didn't suddenly not become true. It's still true that the living know that they shall die and the dead know nothing. That's still true. And every other verse like it, is true. But there's a lot of people teaching all kinds of weird foreign doctrines to what scriptures teach, what God teaches. With the living know that they shall die, but the dead know more than the living. Because, I don't know, I've heard hell preachers say you know more once you go to hell. You just know things, like 23 minutes in hell or something. It's so sick and perverted. I tried to watch some of these videos and I can't do it. Can't do it for more than like a minute. The false teachers about their dreams and stuff, their lying visions and lying dreams of chambers and different levels of fiery pits and 12,000 degrees, and he was only burning in 300 degrees for some reason, I guess because he's better than most people, I don't know. And God threw a believer that believes in the Messiah into hell so that he could see what it's like. It's just, the whole dream is contradicting in the first place. Why would he do that? Then they use the King James Version because it still uses the word hell like 30 times in the Old Testament, and they try to pick and choose all of those verses as speaking about this place that never existed in Old Testament scriptures, and the Hebrews never had this understanding. I don't even think the Pharisees taught such a wicked thing back then. I don't know what they taught for sure, but it's possible they started to believe these things towards the end or here and there, but it's foreign to the Old Testament scriptures of fiery pits and chambers. So they take metaphors literally, they take parables literally and apply it how they want. They take figures of speech, exaggerations, poems. They take all these scriptures that are not just like a 5-year-old wrote them, They have higher meaning, and some of them are more poetic and some are a parable teaching a lesson, and they just do whatever they want with them, They violate the scriptures can't be broken truth. They violate that by telling the world it is broken, but then they say it's not broken, that they're telling the truth. So it's disgusting what they do. It's pretty disturbing. And they have confidence and boldness in what they say, so that's why it's deceiving. They claim to believe, and then they put on the Father that's something he's not, and the Messiah too. He weeps and cries, and he's hoping people could, some other sick dream I heard of that some big shot had. He asked the Father why the Messiah was weeping. He was like in heaven or something, and the Messiah told him, I tried to do everything I could for you or for this person, and he's weeping. But now it's all up to you. I can't do anything more. It's sick mockery what they do, what they say. And these people are just a little tiny people. You look at them from far off and they're just a little dot on God's earth. And that little dot has such boldness for accusations, and it's pretty amazing. The angels don't do this. They don't falsely accuse. They just say, "Lord rebuke you." They don't put on even sinners or whatever. It talks about slanderous accusations against the dignities. Speaking of the angels, people did this back then. The Hebrews, some of them, groups of people, they put on, I don't know details, but they had railing accusations. And I'm pretty sure what this means is that they said that they were sinning in some nasty certain ways. And that's what people do still today. But if that's what people want to believe, that's what they'll believe. But I got dragged out of that. I don't know that I actually ever believed it. It was just never that important to me. And then I started to come to believe that that's what people say about the angels. I'm pretty sure they're lying. But I don't think I ever actually believed, maybe for a short time, kind of in a way, that angels were sinners or something. But they take a couple verses that they don't understand, that's speaking of people, messengers on the earth, most likely, and then they apply it to whatever, angels, or Jude or Peter's talking about people back then reserved for judgment. He knows how to do that. He knows how to reserve them and keep them for judgment. He's talking, the whole context is people. It didn't just suddenly become angels all of a sudden, locked in a literal dungeon underground with everlasting chains. It's just extremely metaphoric way of saying the messengers, the false prophets, liars, people are in age-lasting chains. Or even if you want to say everlasting chains, they're kept there until the judgment of the great day. So it's not talking about someone actually being alive in a dungeon somewhere after they die, chained up, It's nonsense. It's not talking about that. That's exactly what their understanding is, though, but it's angels, actually. They're in physical chains, even though they're, powerful spiritual beings, and they can appear as men, like they have. That's what I understand. But they can't actually be locked up in literal chains. These chains would have to be not literal at the very least. But it's all, I don't know, it's all twisted in there in the church world. Oh, I think I need to end it here. Maybe go outside and go for a walk or something. And I still don't know what today is. What is today? Some kind of holiday. I'll check later. I don't know. I don't even know what day it is. So I better end it here.